Hello everyone, Tina here. I hope you're having a great day. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I get to share with you 5 cards made with the My Monthly Hero Kit for June 2019. I want to share with you quickly everything that comes in this month's kit, including the stamp set here that's a 6x8 stamp set. A lot of jungle animals in here, elephants, cheetahs, tigers, and then a lot of the botany that goes with the jungle is in this kit also. Every element in the kit has a coordinating die, which is fantastic, including 2 fancy dies that are vines. One of them has a curve to it, the other one is a straight line. Now you also get a stencil, which is just beautiful. It's a 6x6 stencil. Love the pattern on here because it's great for the jungle theme, but also I think it would be great for many more projects. You get a mini ink cube of the intensified ink that Hero Arts just came out with. It's actually a darker ink than the intense black. And then you also get a Daniel Smith dot palette. Lots of colors in here, tons of greens, which is fantastic. I'm going to use my water brush and just spread out that color so you can see how vibrant and pretty these colors are. And then I also wanted to share with you, which I didn't know, I learned this when I was doing my linking, but if you're interested in this kit, 10%, if you do purchase it, 10% of the net profits for this kit, Hero Arts is donating to the jungle habitat through the World Wildlife Fund. So that's pretty fantastic. I think that's awesome that Hero Arts is doing that for a great cause. But that's your dot palette there. I'll leave links down below in case you guys want to check it out. Okay, I'm going to start off by stamping all of my images. I'm going to stamp them on some watercolor cardstock. I just put 2 sheets inside my Misty here. And I'm going to ink up all of my images with my intensified mini ink cube here. I had to stamp it a few times to get a good impression because there was a lot of images on here. And since watercolor cardstock is textured, sometimes you do have to stamp twice. That top page up there with the leaves and the greenery, I actually stamped 2 of those. And some of the images I didn't use, but I colored them in anyway, just for maybe future projects. But I used my dot palette to color in all of my images with my water brush. I didn't leave in the coloring only because it did take me a little bit of time, but the coloring was super easy. And the intensified ink cube works beautifully with the watercolors. There was no bleeding or anything with that. But after I have all of my images colored in, I love that they had a variety of greens too. I'm going to take the coordinating dies and die cut out each one of my elements here. I just think the jungle theme was super fun, and I love that Hero Arts has coordinating dies for all of their images. Okay, once everything's die cut out, I just put them aside and we're going to start our first project. I'm using the Daniel Smith watercolor dot palette here, and I sprayed some watercolor cardstock, and I wanted to create a very soft but a little bit more colorful background. So I'm just taking a few of the colors here. I did spray my panel with my water bottle first, and I'm just spreading out some of the colors. I chose some blues and greens. Here I'm going in with the purple. And then I'm going to use a circle die to cut out this, and I wanted to make sure that my background was fully covered. And I think I had a little bit more room for some purple. So we're going to add a little bit of purple, just spreading all those, kind of creating a rainbow for my background. I'm going to use my heat gun and go ahead and dry my panel, and then I cut it out using a stitch circle die. Now, while I cut that out, I cut out 2 smaller circle frames. This first frame here will fit my watercolor background here. We're just going to glue that to our background. For this card, I'm using the Toucan, and then there's a little tree branch in the stamp set, and then there's also some greenery that almost looks like a succulent, but I'm sure it's not. I'm layering my panel how I'm going to later on how I'm going to place that on my card base. This way I can stamp my sentiment. For this card I chose Hello Friend. And again I'm going to use the intensified black ink here. We'll stamp that a few times. Lovely. Okay, I'm going to take my tree branch. We're going to add some foam adhesive behind it. And this is going to go right above my sentiment. And then I'm also going to take that smaller circle frame and place that right over my tree branch. So the tree branch is hanging out on the left and right, but I think it just kind of looked a little bit different, so I went with it. I'm going to go ahead and add my greenery, and then we'll go ahead and add some foam tape behind our little toucan and place him on the tree. Lovely. We're going to flip this over, add some glue behind here, and I'm going to glue this down to a panel that's 4 inches by 5 1/4, so it's slightly smaller than my card base. We'll just add some tape behind here and adhere that to our standard A2 size card base. And then we need a few little bells and whistles, so I'm going to bring in some blue gems. These are from Studio Katia, and I just going to add 5 of them on my panel just to bring out some of that blue in the background. And then I'm going to bring in my Nuvo Aqua Shimmer pen. I want to warn you, when you do this, it does spread out your watercolor. So I was very careful when I added a little bit of sparkle to my little toucan's beak there. But that finishes off card number 1. Nice colorful background here. Here's a close-up. Okay, we're going to move along to card number 2. I wanted to use that beautiful stencil. So I taped it behind some white cardstock. Actually, it's a panel that measures 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. Now I wanted to use some texture paste, but I wanted to tint it a little bit with some distress ink. I wanted to add a little green to it. So this is Shabby Shutters, and I'm just mixing my texture paste in with my Shabby Shutters. And I didn't mix it too well because I wanted kind of a variant of color on my background. So there's some white, there's some darker green, and then there's also some lighter shades of green. But I'm just spreading it over my stencil. I had to add a little bit more. And then we'll just carefully remove that. And I love the look of the stencil. It's so pretty. We're just going to remove that. And then I like to go over the edges with my finger, getting rid of all that extra texture paste that's hanging over. And then I'm going to set this aside to dry. While that's drying, we're going to stamp our sentiment. For this card, we're going to use the elephant here. And I chose a sentiment that says Stay Wild. I'll stamp that with the intensified black ink. And then I'm going to bring in some greenery too. I'm going to flip over. I'm actually going to trim down my sentiment just a little bit so it's a little more balanced. But I'll flip over my elephant and add some foam tape behind him, and we're going to stick him on the sentiment strip. And then I did also die cut out 2 of the greenery leaves, and we're going to stick those to the left of our elephant. But later on I ended up coloring in 1 more leaf and then putting him on the right side of the elephant, just for a little more balanced. But this first one we're going to glue, the second one we're going to pop up, and then the third one that I'm not showing is actually popped up as well. Okay, this is my background. It's all dry. I smudged the bottom corner right down there, and so I thought we can cover it up with a very thin frame. The frame size will fit my card front beautifully. So this was actually left over from the next card that we're going to be making. But it fit around the edge and it kind of hid that smushed texture paste. Okay, once that's adhered, I'm going to adhere this panel directly to my card base, and it's going to cover the entire front. And then I'm going to add a little bit of foam tape behind my elephant and my sentiment. I doubled up on the upper portion of my elephant since I already had a little bit of dimension behind there. Just so everything's nice and even. And then this is going to go towards the bottom of my card base. There was a little bit hanging over, so I'm just going to use my scissors and trim that off. Lovely. I'm going to finish it off using some Nuvo glitter drops and some white blizzard. Just going over that little elephant headdress. Give it a little bit of sparkle. And then that finishes off card number 2. Here in the close-up, you'll see that extra leaf that I tucked on that right side. I just think it balanced a little bit more. Okay, for card number 3, we are going to, let's see, we're going to do a little bit of die cutting. I'm going to die cut out a very thin frame. The frame is going to be 1/4 inch. So these are my stitch rectangle dies, and I took the 2 largest sizes. And then that extra piece was the one we used for the card previous. But we're going to use these 2 pieces here. Now, for this background, I'm going to use the inside piece that we die cut out. I'm going to do some stamping with some more this is not oxide ink, it's actually a regular distress ink. My plan was to stamp the leaves in the background and then use my water brush to spread out that color. But I ended up not doing it. I liked the solid leaf images. So we're just going to fill in the background. The 2 colors that I'm using are Mowed Lawn, that's the darker one, and then Shabby Shutters. Once we have our entire background filled in, I'm going to stamp the larger leaf one more time just to fill in that area. And I think that looks really neat. I'm going to go ahead and use some glue behind my frame. Oh no, we're going to build our little scene. So these are the images I chose. I chose this greenery here, and then we're going to use the cheetah. I'm going to pop her up with some dimensional adhesive. And then I'll add the 2 other flourishes down right below the cheetah there. And as I was doing this, I thought I didn't know if I had enough room for my sentiment, so we're going to adjust the little cheetah. For my sentiment for this card, I chose Happy Birthday. And we actually have to scoot him down or her down a little bit, which I ended up liking better because she was a little bit more tucked in the greenery. So we'll stamp our Happy Birthday. Okay, we're going to add some glue behind our frame here. This is going to go on our card base. And then I'm going to use my tape runner, and we're going to adhere our background panel right on the inside. I love the layered look of this because both the background panel and the frame has stitch lines on there. And in real life, it just adds that extra detail. I'm going to go ahead and pop up my center panel here with some foam tape. And then that will finish off that card. I think it's a very masculine card. So that's a great option. And you can see the stitch detail for the background. Okay, for my next card, I'm going to use some of the watercolor again in my water brush. I'm going to use almost all the shades of green, and I'm filling in my panel here. This panel is Strathmore, no, it's Canson XL watercolor cardstock. But I wanted to color in the entire background because we're going to use the fancy vine dies. We're going to use both of them. I ended up cutting out 3 of the U-shaped vines and then 3 of the straight vines. It looks very bright and vivid, but once it dries, it pulls back quite a bit. Okay, we're just going to run this through the die cut machine. And then we are ready to assemble. I also created a frame using my stitched rectangle dies here. The inside window on this frame measures 3 inches by 4 1/4. So, and then the outside edge is 4 inches by 5 1/4. So leave me a little bit of a card, a little bit of a border. But I'm taking my vines and I added adhesive behind my frame here, and I'm just tapping my vines behind my frame. Just filling in that background there. And I used the watercolor for the vines. You could use color cardstock if you want, but since I colored in my little monkey with the watercolor, I just wanted it to flow really well. So after I trimmed off all the excess, I'm going to go ahead and add foam tape behind my frame. And then that's going to go on our card base. But we need to stamp our sentiment. For this card, I chose Let the Adventure Begin. I'm going to bring in my Misty to stamp my sentiment because I'm going to stamp directly on my card base. And I needed a little bit more room for my sentiment. So I'm going to peel up my foam tape behind my frame and pull up one of the vines that will be right next to my sentiment. And then this way I have a little bit more room and a little bit more balance for my sentiment. And I think this is going to work out a lot better. So I wanted to bring in some brown, my monkey's brown, so I'm going to use my Memento Rich Cocoa ink to stamp this sentiment. I'm going to stamp it a few times. And then we're going to go ahead and remove the release paper off of our frame and place that on our card base. I think that looks a really neat effect. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and add my little monkey. And then just to give it a little bit more dimension, I'm going to go over some of the leaves on my vine with some Nuvo Jewel Drops. This is Key Lime. And that finishes off that card. A pretty simple card, but those vines, well, you'll see in the close-ups here how cool. I think they look really neat. Okay, for my final card today, I have the elements we're going to use. We're going to use the tree branch, and I cut out a 3 by 3 inch square panel. I'm popping up my tree branch, but I wanted a little bit of color behind it, so I'm going to bring in some distress ink. I'm bringing in Salty Ocean, and just using my blending brush, I'm going to add a little bit of soft shading behind my background here. We're going to go ahead and add our tree branch. And then we have a few of the greenery leaves. We'll add some foam tape behind those. We'll go ahead and add our tiger. And then one more of our little greenery elements. I think that looks great. Okay, we're going to flip this over. I'm going to add some foam tape behind here. And then this one is going to go on a 4 inch by 5 1/4 inch panel. For my sentiment, I chose the one that says Sending a Jungle of Joy. Now for my sentiment, I wanted to use brown ink, but then I wanted a little green in there too. So the jungle is a scripty font. So I'm going to mask off the jungle and stamp Sending a and of Joy with my Memento Rich Cocoa ink. And then I stamped that on my panel, and then I did the opposite. I masked off Sending a and of Joy, and then I'm going to ink up my jungle with my green ink. Now I started off with moss, but moss was a little bit too bright, and I actually think one of my lids got switched because I think moss is actually more of like an olivey color. So I brought in green heels, and I think these are the two colors that I mixed up. But I used both of them, green heels and moss ink. So my jungle is nice and green. Kind of it goes with my background there. I'm going to remove the release paper and add our tiger panel. This is another great masculine card, I think. We'll go ahead and adhere that to our card base. And then I had a little smudge, so I'm just erasing it. But that finishes off that card. I didn't add no bells and whistles. I thought that was pretty busy. But here's a close-up at this card. So now we get to take a look at all 5 cards that I made with my Monthly Hero June 2019 card kit. If you're interested in the kit, or if you have it already, I hope that this gives you some ideas on how to use it. I think it's fantastic that Hero Arts is donating 10% of the profits to the World Wildlife Fund. I think that's pretty amazing. Thank you so much for joining me, guys. I wish you a fantastic day, and we will see you again real soon. Bye-bye.